We'll start off with the normal housekeeping. Keep your mic muted. If you're not talking, raise your hand and the chat function. This is the agenda that Mary put forward with Sandy. So we'll go ahead and do roll call.
Sounds great. And if anybody wants to add anything for community updates, feel free.
Yes, I always forget that part, so thank you. Brad.
Yep, I'm here and I don't have any community update information.
Charlie.
I actually had an email from Charlie today, and he is in Argentina as we speak.
Oh, good for him. Christina. Oops. Connie?
I'm here. I'm here.
Dan Brown?
Dan's here.
Danielle Burlingame? David Norwood? Dave Wynn?
Yep, I'm here.
Elizabeth? Gail Manchewitz? Gail Dugan? Jason?
I'm here. No update.
Jeffrey? Looks like I have quite the formatting problem going on here. Jeremy Welsh? Joe?
I'm here.
Justin? And Harvey? Laura Ogar? Leah? Lynn Knopf? Lynn McIntosh? Margaret? Mary?
I'm here.
Mike Borman? Pam McQueer? Patty?
I'm here.
Richard Burns?
Here, no update.
You? Rick Radisky?
Here.
Bob Pataki? Samra?
I'm present.
Sandy is gone. Shalene?
I'm here.
Stacy Taylor? Teresa?
Here.
Tony?
Here.
Bill Burnett?
And Kelly, I do see Stacy Taylor on the list of guests, so she probably just wasn't able to unmute. So.
Great, perfect. I'm gonna move that off out of the way. So Mary, you wanna take it over?
Yep.
Or are we handing it? Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much. Appreciate that and appreciate everybody coming out tonight. With Sandy gone, I'm going to try and do this. So any errors, please let me know, and I'd be happy to work on that. I believe that the first order of business is going to be voting for Jason Legowski to join the COG leadership team. And Jason did do a presentation last month, and I would entertain a motion to have Jason be nominated for the COG leadership team.
Yeah, Mary, this is Connie. Just like to give a little bit of background again in case your memory's failing like mine is. He has about 3 decades of experience in 3 different countries. He's worked on Superfund sites, RCRA sites, but he's got a lot of very good background. He's been spending most of his time in recent years on PFAS remediation for things like, or treatment technologies for water, soil, and concrete. I do want the COG to know, though, that he is with Brown and Caldwell, which is a private sector consulting firms. This is the Governor's Citizens Advisory Workgroup, based heavily on citizens. But if you know that you have a private sector consultant on your team, then we're making it known to everybody that he is a private sector consultant and he's on the Citizens Advisory Group. So, or maybe. So I think the first order of business is that I make a motion and somebody needs to second it, and then we need to have a discussion before the final vote. So I move that Jason Legowski of Brown and Caldwell be admitted as a member to the leadership team, as a member of the leadership team. So Mary, you ask if there's a second.
Okay, does anybody have a second?
It looks like Daniel
Okay.
Brown
Yep.
has his hand up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Daniel?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, is
Connie
there
made the motion, Daniel seconded. Do we want to do a roll call vote?
Well, before we do that, Mary, Robert's Rules of Order will say
Okay.
that what you need to do is discuss it. Is there any discussion with Jason Legowski? We can ask him questions. For example, how likely is it that we will have good treatment technology that is reasonable to apply to these different PFAS sites, or whatever kind of questions come to our mind? Are you uncomfortable with, some people might say, well, a private sector consultant might be a spy for the private sector. John, Mary, John has his hand up.
Yeah, I
I'm
got
having a hard time seeing that.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks,
Okay.
Joe.
Okay, the only comment and question is, yes, he's a professional consultant, but in this committee, he's coming in as an individual, not a representative of a firm. Is that correct?
I'll answer that, and that's correct.
Right. So, we are voting for him to serve as an individual with a technical background in this work group. So I guess it's just good to clarify that, yes, it is an individual, not a representative of a firm in this committee.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey, Mary.
Does anybody else have any comments? I see
Mary,
Sandra
can you hear
has
me?
Hello, is that Lynn?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I just finally got my iPad to work, so now I'm gonna sit outside here and merrily ride my bicycle, my stationary bicycle, and continue this meeting. I'm sorry I couldn't get on earlier, but I'm here.
Okay, great. And am I seeing one other person with their hand up, or is that still Joe?
I thought I saw Samira.
I'm not seeing,
Yeah, it looks like
hand raised.
Samra has her hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Samra?
Hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so I was having tech issues. So I had a question just pertaining to the background. I recognize that he's coming on as an individual, but has your business had, or the company that you work with, had any business with the state or any company that has contaminated with PFAS or contamination with PFAS?
So if I understood the question correctly, does Brown and Caldwell work with any clients potentially in the state of Michigan that have PFAS issues? And the short answer would be yes, but I'm not involved in those directly. And to my knowledge, nothing directly with the state of Michigan.
Thank you.
Did anybody else
have
have any
another-
comments?
I have another question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Have you been affected by PFAS contamination in your area or near your area?
Near the area, yes. I live in Howell, so there's a few sites in there in the general vicinity. Part of the reason I joined the group.
Did anybody else have any other questions?
Okay, Mary, call for a roll call vote.
Okay. Kelly, can you do the roll call, please?
Brad,
Yes, I guess. Is that the right answer?
sure.
I
Oh, I
approve.
have-
How's that?
I have Charlie here and he's not. Connie Boris,
Yes.
Dan Brown,
Yes.
Dave Wynn,
Yes.
can Jason vote?
No,
abstain.
no.
I'm guessing it would be yes anyway. Joe,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Patty,
Yes.
Richard Burns,
Yes.
Rick Radisky,
Yes.
Samra,
Yes.
Shalene,
Yes.
Stacy Taylor, guessing audio issues.
She says yes in the chat.
Okay. Teresa,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Lynn McIntosh.
Yes, and thank you for being
And-
willing to do this.
Yep, and I did notice we have Lynn Na, so we'll go ahead and let her vote. I'm thinking.
Yes.
Linoff?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'll vote yes.
Okay. And did I miss anybody that happened to join? Looks like the answer is yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Jason, for being willing to serve. We appreciate it. And unanimous. That's even better. I think now on the agenda, we were going to have a discussion of PFAS in the fish study of the Huron and Rouge rivers. And I believe that Dan Brown was going to lead that off.
Yeah, I can do that, Mary. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Oops. All right, so you should see the title card slide. So this is a study that the Huron River Watershed Council and Friends of the Rouge supported. The Ecology Center led the study, and I do want to be very clear that they did about 80% of the work. The Ecology Center really did most of the heavy lifting on this. Jillian, Erica pulled together this presentation. Jeff Gearhart was really instrumental as a scientist throughout the project. So this really is their labor of love, and HRWC and Friends of the Rouge supported it throughout. This relatively quickly so we can have plenty of time for discussion. But the impetus for this really came from wanting to know more about how PFAS move through the aquatic ecosystems of these watersheds. And we were trying to get a sense for where PFAS might be in some of the gaps, just in the limited capacity of the state fish sampling for PFAS. Up front, I do want to say that you can't compare directly the results that we found to state sampling. We did follow the guidelines for collecting the fish to make sure that we got clean samples that weren't contaminated. But what we were looking for was a little bit different. So it's trying to be supplemental to what the state does, not necessarily, or I should say it's trying to be complementary, not necessarily just supplemental. So just to remind folks, Huron River has a do not eat fish advisory for pretty much all of the river, from basically Milford on down to I-275, and then from I-275 on down to Lake Erie, there's basically a do not eat too much fish advisory, and there's some more nuanced guidelines below that. The Rouge River has an advisory for bluegill and sunfish caught in the lower branch and some of the main branch. And then, as we've seen in the media, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, and several other inland lakes have other advisories. All of those are informed by the state sampling and the science that goes into those fish advisories, which sets that 300 parts per billion limit, which we'll talk a little bit about. So yeah, the goal was to understand really how PFAS move through the ecosystem. Look for 40 PFAS chemicals. What is particularly different about this study versus what Eagle has looked for is that Eagle's looking for the fish fillets, and is with HHS is really focused on public health and fish consumption, which makes sense. In this study, we sampled different organs within the fish and the whole fish, as well as the fillets, to get a sense of where the PFAS is building up in different parts of the fish and how that could move through the ecosystem through predators and other functions as fish are defecating and as they're laying eggs and things like that. What is really neat about this project, and maybe the super fun part of the project, was engaging with anglers. So these are people that live in the area, that have fished for a long time in the area. Many of the folks have eaten fish from the various rivers and lakes that we'll be talking about. And they really helped guide the project along. They give us a lot of pointers on what we should do and what we shouldn't do. They actually went out, caught and stored, and in some cases helped dissect the fish. And of course, we tried to financially compensate them, although not nearly enough for what the work that they did. So they were really the backbone of this study. I won't read these out loud, but you can see sort of their testimonials about why they were getting involved. And I think all of the anglers had a pretty deep connection to the area. They really care about the health of the ecosystem and the people that are fishing and could be eating these fish. So I'm not as familiar with the Rouge River watershed as I am with the Huron, but this shows you where the fish were collected and the highest PFAS levels that were found in various locations in fish. And what you can see here is that sort of regardless of where we looked, we found PFAS. PFAS were found in all fish, but at different levels. And in many cases, it didn't necessarily match up with our expectations. So I'll leave this up for a second, just so folks can kind of commit it to memory for a second. In the Huron River watershed, this is something I can talk a little bit more about. So if you look up by Hubble Pond in Milford, that is close to where Tribar Technologies was releasing PFAS for several years, and why the whole watershed, the whole river, is contaminated. So we expected to find pretty high levels in Kent Lake. That's where the initial round of testing by the state found the extremely high levels in the fish. They've already come down, and we saw that in the second round of testing. And these levels are generally consistent. If I kind of look across the map and noting that these are whole fish levels, not fillet levels, these are broadly consistent with what the state found in fillets. But what is really interesting to me is that places like Kent Lake, where we expect to find PFAS, there's no surprise there. But then places like Ford Lake, which are much farther down, farther away from the source, and even between, or farther down than other locations between Kent Lake and Ford Lake, like Ann Arbor, has a lower PFAS level. So it's not always clear why we're seeing the levels of PFAS in the species of fish that we're seeing. We also looked at places that we intentionally thought would be sort of safe control locations. So we had Whitmore Lake and basically the chain of lakes and the Highland chain of lakes over by Pinckney. And you can see it even in those locations where they don't have a direct surface water connection to the Huron River directly and the major source of contamination, there's still PFAS in those fish. And that was the thing that was, I think, surprising to me, is there is PFAS there, but it's also higher than we expected, even in those what we call safe locations. There's no industrial commercial sources. Those lakes over by Pinckney are, basically surrounded by Pinckney State Rec area. Whitmore Lake is basically surrounded entirely by residential development. There's no clear source of where that PFAS is coming from to either of those lakes. Anglers caught about 100 fish. About 60 were processed to send off for 3 different labs. One, as I recall, was in Germany. Homogenized, some were put on dry ice, A lot of work went into this. This was where Ecology Center and the Angler really shine with their project. And just summarizing the results, PFAS still in every fish we tested in both rivers. Of the 40 PFAS chemicals that we were looking for, we found 14. Each of the fish had at least one of the 14 chemicals in its body. PFAS was found in every fish tested, and that's a little bit important knowing now with the new EPA drinking water regulations at 4 parts per trillion that we're going to get some additional protection at least for PFAS over the coming years. This is just a summary slide showing where we saw those highest hits. So again, Kent Lake, pretty much expected, but Ford Lake coming in second is a little bit worrisome, and it would be nice to know a little bit more about why that's happening. So that's sort of one of those questions where we'd say we need more research and a longer study to try and figure out why that is the way it is. Hubble Pond also very close to Tri-Bar technology, so we'd expect a lot of PFAS contamination there, but it is interesting that it was lower than in Kent Lake. So again, is it the age of the fish? Is it the species of the fish? And it's hard for us to see a trend or an explanation looking at any of that. Of course, we're talking to anglers. First thing we always say is make sure you follow the Michigan MDHHS Eat Safe Fish guidance. HRWC is a partner in the Eat Safe Fish River Walkers program. We try to get folks to look at safer sites that have lower PFAS levels, but it is a good nutrition source, and we know that many people rely on fishing their local rivers and waterways for a good source of protein and nutrition. So we don't want to diminish that when people really need it. So, the key question that comes up for us, particularly in light of several threads of research, is, are the current Eat Safe Fish guides, are those protective enough? And as we've talked about before during these meetings, I think the answer is that they really need an update. Those guidance levels are based on pretty obsolete data at this point. We now know PFAS is more toxic and more widespread than previously thought. So we're hoping that the health advisory levels released by the EPA back in June, and now the drinking water standards will help give us a little bit better benchmark on where these levels will be, which will help us inform anglers throughout both watersheds of where they can more safely consume fish. And of course, a lot of points about how to solve the problem. I don't think there's anything that we haven't talked about here quite a bit. Basically limiting non-essential use and eventually, banning PFAS as a class, I think are the key things. But more directly, more signage in heavy fishing areas. That's something the anglers noticed. And updating those consumption advisories. Those are things that can happen in the near future that would significantly reduce people's exposure. Do want to highlight that this has gotten pretty significant press from all over the world at this point. I think there was a European news outlet that reached out to some of us. So you've probably seen some version of this story floating around in your favorite news outlet in Michigan. At this point, I think we just want to make sure we give a shout out to the anglers that we had. It was really cool to follow this community-based research methodology. Really kept the interest and excitement up, which was pretty great. It was a lot of fun to train with the anglers. I'm not much of an angler myself, but it was a lot of fun to work with them, and had got a lot of enjoyment out of interacting with every single one of them. Some lessons learned, I think, that were really important for Ecology Center is, they basically did a test run of samples up from Clark's Marsh in Oscoda. So, basically getting fish from a place that they know is super contaminated, which helped them work out a lot of the bugs for just, handling the fish after they're properly sampled and collected. That was important. Work was funded by Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, and had a lot of support from Indiana University. And this is a list of the anglers that worked with us. So I will stop there.
Thank you, Daniel. Does anybody have any questions for Daniel regarding the study? Tony.
Yes, thanks, Mary. Dan, and thank you. I think this is a really important service that you and your group and the related groups performed. And in Oscoda, obviously, we're really interested in the fish as well. I had a couple of questions. Well, a question and maybe a comment. First, when you did the testing, did you notice whether or not the levels were higher in certain organs or parts of the parts of the fish than others, and was it higher in fillets than others? Or maybe you could expound on that a little bit.
We did, and I don't want to get my memory wrong, but I remember it was high in the eggs. It was high in the liver, so that the fillets were lower than the average, which is sort of good news, bad news. It's good for public consumption, of course. But for other predators and for how PFAS are transported through ecosystems or between regional ecosystems, if you imagine birds eating these fish and then transporting that PFAS elsewhere, it does mean that when we're talking about PFAS in fish, if we're just looking at the fillets, we're sort of under addressing that problem. But basically the organs that manage digestion and filtration had higher levels of PFAS, but they were also in the eggs at a high level, which was surprising to me.
Interesting. And just to comment, I if you have thoughts, you talked about we know that the guidance was established back at least sometime before 2012 when the Do Not Eat was issued in Oscoda, and I know that at the National PFAS Conference this past year in June, there was a large presentation made about PFAS in fish. And what struck me there was that I think in the states that have utilized more updated, guidance levels, my recollection was that the do not eat levels or the action levels were in the teens, as opposed to 300, like 15, 18, somewhere in there. And as I see your numbers, it looked like virtually every area you sampled under that criteria would create a do not eat. And I don't know if I'm misstating that, or have you looked into what other states are doing, in that regard?
Yeah, so I think you summarized that pretty well. The only clarification is because those sample numbers are from the whole fish, so we found PFAS up to those levels. So the fillet levels would generally be a bit lower. So there would be several lakes in there that have PFAS levels that are still concerning to me, but they'd be lower than those teen numbers that you saw on the screen, for example. Whitmore Lake, I remember, for example, I think it was in the low single digits parts per billion. So I think it was like 3 to 7 parts per billion, if I recall, just as a reference point. But what you're pointing to, I think, is really important, which is that, I think everybody knows that the numbers that Michigan is using at this point are just obsolete. They need to be updated. What the safe levels or levels that substantially reduce exposure should be, I'm not going to pretend to know that, but my instinct based on what other states are doing and what we're seeing as sort of this quote unquote background level. I think it's probably pretty close to the detection limit, or it is in those low parts per billion levels. So call it 3 to 10 parts per billion is probably, I think, where we're headed, if not lower. Just like the drinking water standards keep going lower, I think the PFAS fish consumption numbers are also trending that same direction. It has a whole bunch of implications. Consuming fish is different than drinking water. It's hard to escape drinking water. There are, in most cases, easier alternatives for fishing and consuming fish, except for those most vulnerable communities that really need the nutrition and are relying on fishing in their home waters. I know there's more of a discussion about that, and I'm sure there's probably folks listening into this call that are wrangling with that question right now of what's the appropriate advisory to make sure that people are getting the nutrition they need versus what their PFAS exposure level is. And that is a tough question. What I will say is I do think we do need clearer guidance so that we can inform anglers and residents in our communities and in our watersheds of how to eat fish safely, where to fish, etc.
Thanks, Ken. That's really helpful.
Sorry. Samra, did you have a question as well?
Yes, I did. So my question was regarding the numbers at Ford Lake, and seeing them, if I'm not mistaken, they were considerably higher than the numbers at Kent Lake. And so would we be able to infer, or is there some kind of implication that there's a possible contamination source at or near Ford Lake that could be causing that? Or is this just a random one-off, inconsistency that you think is happening?
I don't know is the short answer. I've been stewing over that very question for a while now after I saw that number, and we know there are some other lower level sources that are contributing to the Huron River. There's one up in Dexter, for example, that's probably contributing low levels, but that is also upriver from the Ann Arbor drinking water intake. So what also helps inform us here is that Ann Arbor samples their drinking water pretty regularly, and they sample both the intake raw water and their treated drinking water. So we have a pretty good sort of gate measurement periodically for how much PFAS is in the river at that point. So if there was something that we're missing, it would have to be below Ann Arbor. And there are a few legacy places that were there that might be. We're working on Penn Dam right now, and there used to be a mill there that we think might have used PFAS. Maybe there's PFAS in the sediment in Ford Lake at a higher level than in other places, but all of that's really just speculation. There's nothing that's been confirmed, that could be getting it close to Kent Lake levels. I don't think that we just don't know.
I think I'm seeing two raised hands that are phone numbers, and they look like, the one is 616-558-7607, and I'm not sure if the second number, because it also ends in 07, if that's the same number.
On my screen, Mary, there's no phone numbers. I've got two hands for Dave Wynn and Lynn McIntosh.
Yeah, Lynn McIntosh is here, but Dave can go first if he'd like to.
That's fine. Dan, I appreciate the presentation. It was very interesting. A couple of questions I do have, though, is number one, the data that was taken for all this fish sampling, I would assume that the state has received that data and reviewed it Because, and the reason I say that is you mentioned following the MDHHS guidelines. Has the Eat Safe Fish in your area been updated and sent out so that the people, tourists or the people that fish understand what the fish consumptions are, what fish do not eat based on those samples, is my number one question. Number two, you mentioned Tri-Bar. Has any of this information been shared with Tri-Bar from a standpoint to let them know that there's grant money that's been spent for doing some sampling of fish, of which they may have caused the contamination of that fish. So they need to obviously step up and put some grant money or something to that.
Yeah, so the first question about sharing the data. So I don't know what the Ecology Center folks have shared. It certainly is there. In terms of the timing with the Eat Safe Fish guidelines, the data that we got the data back late fall, which were after the Eat Safe Fish guidelines were updated. So they were not in the newer Eat Safe Fish guides. Now we are doing the River Walker program for the Huron, and we'll certainly be talking about these results as a part of that program in the Huron River. So it'll directly inform the anglers that way. Based on what we're seeing for the advisories, there's nothing in here that would alter the advisories based on the numbers that the advisories use. So there's nothing that triggers a change based on that 300 parts per billion level, nor is there anything that really is distinct or goes against what the state has found in their sampling. I think the issue really on all that is we really need updated levels that inform the advisories everywhere. We really need to update that 300 parts per billion. Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah. So it could, but this study was small, and I don't think we can directly compare it in that way. I think it helps give us a little bit more perspective. I do think that this study, something that looks a lot like this study in mechanism, I would like to see that watersheds across Michigan. We've already talked about wanting to do this over several years in our watershed with the Ecology Center, and like to see more sampling from the state, and particularly like sampling at the same spots, with multi-year gaps to give us a better read on what's happening. I think that all of that would be informative, and sampling procedure like this could help out with that.
I guess I don't understand. I guess, Dan, I mean, interrupt you, but I guess I don't understand. The Ecology Center is doing a lot of this testing, and I don't understand why the state wouldn't be doing this testing.
I think it's just a question of capacity. I'll leave it to the state folks to answer that. But yeah, I think it's just lab time to catch the fish, etc.
Okay.
To answer your second question about Tri-Bar, yeah, you won't hear any love for me on Tri-Bar. They have not been communicative or cooperative in any way with any of their neighbors or any of the groups that are worried about this. So I'm not optimistic about that.
Maybe this is information that needs to go to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General needs to contact Tri-Bar and have conversations with them about them coughing up some funding for some of this stuff.
I would like to move on to Lynn now.
Yeah, can you hear me, Mary?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, Dan, I had a couple of simple questions. The first one is this area of the state I'm not as familiar with, but it's probably already been mentioned, but I'm thinking about some of the farms in the area, like going back and doing an historical look of which was farmland because of this. We're finding out, I think, in Ottawa County recently, Rick would know. All of a sudden, someone buys a piece of land and you test it, and oh my gosh, it's contaminated. We didn't know, and it was due to treatment and sludges placed on farmland. Has that been thought about?
Yeah, we haven't thought about that broadly, and just with the information that's in the the state's GIS PFAS tool, the map tool that we
right
helped work on. You can get a sense of just sort of the spread of PFAS chemicals and where from the surface water tests that are in that. And I think what we see, and again, a lot of speculation here, but I think what we're seeing is that there is, basically runoff, septic leakage. There's a lot of these non-point source contributors to, I don't want to call it a background again because it's not natural, but to this ambient level that we see throughout the river. I will say if the lower middle part of our Huron, so around Dexter, basically, just before it gets to Ann Arbor, is where we would likely see kind of an uptick if there was some sort of agricultural runoff related issue to PFAS. And if it's there, it's not super obvious. So, but
all right.
Now, I mean, we have done a lot of protective measures in our watershed to reduce runoff from agricultural land anyway. So it's, is it that, some of that is working, but for a different purpose and it is helping filter out PFAS? I don't know. But there's not a clear, there's nothing that jumps off the page at me that farms are a major contributor. I think they're more of sort of a background contributor.
Okay. Yeah, that's certainly possible. My next question, and maybe talked about later, is the reason they test in parts per billion rather than parts per trillion, and is that because it's easier to measure? I'm always automatically for myself transferred to parts per trillion because that's how we measure it in drinking water, but I didn't know the reason for parts per billion. It makes it seem like it's not as bad somehow, but I don't know the answer to that. It's basically the sampling sensitivity. I think it's limited to about 1 or 2 parts per billion, if I recall, for fish. But that does raise the important point, which is that it is 1,000 times higher than the levels that we're talking about in water, and we can't really compare those two directly. But what it, and like the Environmental Working Group report said, when you eat a contaminated fish, you are getting that, pretty high dose all at once. And how that relates and stays in your system relative to drinking water that's contaminated at drinking water standards over time. You can get more through eating fish infrequently than you could from, drinking water that is considered safe or just above safe levels. Yeah, and that's where I think it in terms of raising the issue by reporting it, if they can only test in billions, that's fine, but then to at least add those zeros on. I know 3 more zeros adds a lot to a paycheck. So, I mean, 3 zeros can add a lot to making people think about, wow, that kind of thing. But that's just, and then my third question is, and this is a larger question, so maybe it'll come up later. That is, when Garrett Ellison wrote an article about the Rogue River here in Rockford and tried to engage groups like Trout Unlimited or Isaac Walton or other Rogue River, our watershed group, whatever, it's like comments came back such that there's it seems like, I can't put a number on it, but an attitude that, oh, well, we just catch them and throw them back, so it's not a problem. And I'm like, how do we engage people who do the fishing, anglers and all that, in these groups that have some say to be concerned about it? And that's where I think the fact that even though, you might have a fillet, the fact that it's high in the whole fish, and you've got other animals, predators. I mean, it's just, that's a big question. But it seems that would be a huge help to get some of these groups with maybe some clout to weigh in on some of this. That's all. Just a thought.
And the different chapters are, they all have different levels of interest in this. It does relate to how they're fishing and what they're doing with the fish. What I can say has worked for us is, it's meeting the anglers where they're fishing as a part of that.
Yes.
Riverwalker program works well.
That's great.
And I think where it's going now, that it's been found in some Great Lakes fish, is that the commercial fisheries will be a big ally on this.
Good.
Because it has some pretty substantial economic implications as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you so much.
I'd like to call on Joe, but Daniel, I also wanted to point out that Jason Legowski put in a couple things in the chat related to possible sources of where the PFAS might come. So Joe, do you want to unmute?
Yes, I have one comment and I have one question. The number for Ford Lake caught my eyes. And I know something that went on there for decades, that part of the river. So there's some possibly the legacy based contamination still sitting there in the sediments or something. So there was a paper mill, a very large paper mill downstream of Ann Arbor, and there was 2 car companies that shut down. I helped them shut down, but there's some legacy there. And then there's some other things that I know. So if you want to talk about some of those details, I'll be happy to do that with you. But there got to be some connection to the legacy things to see 100 parts per billion there in whatever fish we caught. So that's my comment. And my question is, knowing these kind of numbers now and a few fish, when are we gonna sample these people who catch fish? So we're talking about health and safety of fish, but when are we talking about people? What kind of numbers we're dealing with? And I think there's some urgency for us to know what we got. I mean, we're kind of in this waiting game for a while. When we're talking parts per billion or whatever on this little fish we don't eat mostly, but is anybody gonna do something about fishermen? Us?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see that too. There are a lot of, it's unfortunately there are a lot of options for testing people that have been exposed. I think that it is a really good idea to test, populations of people that have been longtime anglers and inland wild-caught lake fish consumers. I think that makes sense. So yeah, I agree. I think that that's a good idea. I think it would help us understand, what the risks are here from fish.
I'd like to call on Tony.
Yeah, Dan, a real question on biomagnification. Again, in Oscoda, we hear about, well, you see PFAS at certain levels in the surface water, but the levels in the fish are dramatically higher. Can you speak to, and I've heard different, biomagnification factors and the like, but maybe you could just kind of explain that, how that works and what we know in that regard.
Yeah, and this is important, I think, for understanding even a lot of how the other environmental and public health criteria kind of intersect on a lot of things. So, particularly with fish or aquatic life, they're immersed in, so even if they're immersed in a low level of PFAS for a long enough time for their entire life, because of the way PFAS behaves and it builds up, bioaccumulates in tissue, and particularly likes, protein heavy tissue, it builds up in fish over the time. So we'd expect larger fish that are consuming more biomass, that are older. We'd expect those fish to have higher levels of PFAS. But like you're saying, that it can be orders of magnitude higher than what is in the surface water sample. So even a relatively low surface water sample, I think, as we've all become accustomed to them, can translate to a much higher level in fish, because the fish are just living their lives in it. And I think I have more questions about this than I do answers. How do the presence of dams affect how fish move and how they're exposed to PFAS in waterways like this? Because then they're sort of trapped in a place where PFAS might be building up in sediments and things like that. So there are a lot of those amplification factors you're talking about. We know PFAS, is higher in foam. Fish like to sort of hang out below dams where you often see a lot of that foam. So there's a lot of ways that we might see PFAS build up and amplify in fish like that.
Rick, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had, I guess, two comments. First of all, there was a study to address Joe's question. There was a study in New York published in, I think, 2022 that had surveys of fishermen and their blood levels, and the people that fished, that I forget how many meals they ate a year or a month, but the blood levels of PFOS was between 2 to 5 times higher than the general population. So I can summarize that for the group and send that out, but we certainly need to have studies done in Michigan. And it's hard enough to get health studies, done on, exposed populations, but there was quite a number of health studies done on anglers back in the days of PCBs, and those weren't done through the CDC. So, somebody just has to get grant funding to survey anglers and get some basic information about, how many meals of fish and what type of fish you eat, and then do a blood sample. And that's, it's hard to track diseases, but you can definitely track the blood, and you can reference against the NHANES that there's a standard database. And I think, the average level in humans is about 5 parts per billion, and the anglers were around 11. So there's definitely an increase in that in terms of concentration. And the question that Tony asked about biomagnification, the reason why fish accumulate so much of it is that they don't breathe oxygen like we do. I mean, we have percent levels of oxygen in the atmosphere, and our lungs are really good at scavenging that out, but fish have to obtain all their oxygen from the water, which is at parts per million levels, and they pass the water over their gills. And oxygen, O2, is somewhat of a non-polar molecule, so anything the form of PFAS that accumulates the most is PFOS, which is not very polar, so it's taken in with the oxygen, so they can accumulate 1,000 times the concentration just from the water. And they also accumulated from food chain biomagnification. So if you have sediment dwelling macroinvertebrates, crayfish, etc. They will pick that up by scavenging it from the water and also scavenging it from their prey that they eat. And I was on a presentation by MDHHS and Eagle about contamination in the Muskegon River watershed, and it was mentioned that they don't really understand why, but it appears that PFAS seems to accumulate more in smaller fish. So it's the reverse of the situation where you'd expect carp and catfish to have more, but they don't for some reason. And things like smelt and pumpkin seed seem to accumulate a lot more. So we don't really understand the physiology of why those smaller fish are accumulating more. And the example that mention is Higgins Lake. There's no PFAS source in Higgins Lake, yet the smelt up there are really high, and you can't figure that out. They sampled all around Higgins Lake as part of the Muskegon River watershed study, and they couldn't find anything, yet the smelt are high. So there's a lot of questions about how the fish are accumulating those levels, but it appears to be more on smaller fish, not the big fish like we typically see for the other contaminants. So anyway.
Thank you. I'm still seeing, I know Abby, you looked at it, but I'm still seeing on my screen the phone number that still has a hand raised, and I don't know of anybody else that does have a hand raised.
Okay, I'm seeing the phone. Well, all I'm seeing is Lynn's hand up. Is anybody else seeing the phone number?
Yeah, I'm seeing the phone number as well. I think it's Lynn.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hand went down there, and it must have been Lynn.
I just put the hand down. So if it's Lynn and she has a question.
Okay, Lynn, I guess, did you have any other questions?
I think there's two Lyns maybe on here, but I put a question in the far right about the foam on lakes. Why on earth it looks like somebody just answered it, why there's so much more PFAS concentration than the water surrounding it. And I'm just wondering, to any science person out there, I know Duck Lake, the one closest to me, connects to Lake Michigan, and foam has been building up incrementally, slowly but surely over the years, to the point where I spoke with Kelly about it, and I'm going to have to put in, take pictures and make a report about it. But do we foresee a point in the future where we're going to have no contacts with lakes because there's so much foam on them? Or is there a chance that the water could end up becoming so full of PFAS that we're going to end up having no contact with the water itself?
So we have on the Huron River, so I guess before I take a shot at that one, Rick and Jason, for everybody, Jason put some comments and things in the chat, which are helpful. And I learned a lot from Rick's discussion about the amplification of the fish. So thanks for that. So Huron River has a foam advisory. I'm not sure if it's technically an advisory, but there are signs up telling people to avoid foam and avoid ingesting foam. If you have dogs or kids, the fear of ingesting foam is very real. And I think it's probably unlikely that we would see a water body contaminated to such a high degree that the ordinary non-foamy surface water would be considered hazardous. But I think already there are a number of places where there are avoid foam signs up and guidance around that.
Sure. How could the Lake Association on a lake, how could they get foam tested if they put together the funds for it? Is there a place that could do it? Is that something, I don't know if that's something Annis Water Resources can do, but first I think we'd like to kind of confirm our suspicions about what's in the foam and then kind of move forward from there.
Rick?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the foam, there's a special procedure for collecting the foam. They use kind of like a clean swimming pool skimmer, and they have to put it in plastic bags and stuff. And I don't know who does that for Eagle, but there's a special procedure for doing that, and you can there's a foam hotline or a number that you can call, or you can make a report for it and request the testing of it. But the way to tell and this is just a visual look at it, but when you see foam that's sticky, that's probably PFAS. And if you see foam that doesn't stick to a stick, if you put it in there, that may be natural, because if you go to Tequila Falls, you see foam all over the place, and that's from the natural tannins and lignins. So you have to kind of there's foam in a lot of lakes, and it may not be PFAS.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Anyway.
Okay. Okay. So
Tony?
it's just a matter of contacting Eagle and having kind of helping to see if we can get that done. Okay. I was just wondering about the increase in the number of resident complaints about the amount of foam. And I've kind of noticed it myself, and maybe it's natural, maybe it's not, but it would be nice to know kind of what the starting point is of that. Okay. All righty. Well, thank you to everybody
Lynn, Mike Jury just put some information in the chat as well about testing.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for speaking up. Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond a little bit more to Lynn on the foam, because we probably were dealing with the foam on our lake in Oscoda longer than anybody, which, I mean, we're really kind of ground zero for that. And Lynn, I would just suggest to you, if you're having any troubles getting Eagle to get out to do it, I know that they're stretched a bit. There are people in organizations in Oscoda that have tested foam. We've done a lot of testing up there, and if you want to reach out, I can put you in contact with folks who've done that up there. We've kind of done sort of some citizen testing with some scientific help, and we'd be happy to work with you on that if you're interested.
Okay, great. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, and Mike Jury is the expert that I turn to on this. When we were finding foam on Portage Lake in the Huron River pretty regularly, I think it was like there was a while there where it felt like every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks, I was emailing back and forth with Mike and trying to get pictures and asking questions about that. And there were even times where I would go out and stand in front of the foam and take video and photos of it, and it would be gone within, maybe an hour or so. So it's a lot of times, you just can't get somebody out there faster. It's foam. It's the nature of the foam. So.
It's getting to be almost 7:10. Do we want to end that here and move on so that I think Abby's got a couple different things to cover maybe today? And I think we'll move on to the subcommittee reports, and I'll start with the membership subcommittee. We did not actually meet other than an email between Daniel and Joe and myself regarding whether there had been any other nominations other than Jason for the leadership team, and there had not been. And then is there anybody here from the website review subcommittee that would like to report?
Yeah, this is Brad Venman. We did meet.
Hi, Brad.
Hi. We did meet at 4:30 and had a good discussion. Kelly pointed out that a couple of things that have been updated recently and are in the process of being reviewed and updated on the MPART website regarding the drinking water and wells drop-down menu. There's one of their student intern or student employees has updated or created a PDF document that lists the state of Michigan, the laboratories available in the state of Michigan for resident that somebody can contract with and have their water sampled. So that's a new thing, but there are some other aspects of that particular portion of the website that have been updated. One of the things that we'd like anybody that has a question, or not a question, identifies that there may be some data gaps or information needs on the website, to potentially identify those and send a note back to me or Kelly, and then we can see what can be done possibly to no promises, obviously, because there's quite a complicated process for updating the website. But if you identify something that might need to be done, we can at least put it into the list of priorities. So that's about it. And if anybody wants to join the subcommittee, we do meet at 4:30 every the month prior to the COG meeting. So.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Brad. And before we move on to the next subcommittee, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dan Brown for that great report, and also for being willing to tackle that at the last minute. I appreciate that. And so then for the prevention subcommittee, Dave, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I've actually, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, I need to schedule an updated meeting with the group. I've been on vacation for the last 2.5 weeks, so I will get that meeting scheduled before our next COG meeting.
No problem. Congratulations on your vacation.
Thank you.
The next subcommittee would be engaging the public. I can speak on it if and anybody else who is there, please speak up. We did meet. There were 4 of us who did meet, and we're still struggling some with the actual details of the document that we had voted on last meeting. And we think that there are going to have to be some kind of adjustments to it as the process rolls out. And so, we would like to try and even maybe after next meeting, when we can work out some more of those details. And Abby may be addressing some of those as well in her talk tonight. So, but those people who are still willing we would appreciate maybe setting up a time other than the 5 o'clock to be able to do that with all the people who are interested. And then we will turn it over to Abby for MPART updates.
All right. Thank you, Mary. Okay, couple of things just so and maybe Kelly's got some of this in her slides at the end, but obviously I think everybody saw the announcement from EPA came out today on drinking water standards, PFOA, PFOS, and then a mixture of 4 additional PFAS. We're still evaluating the data. We're going to have some time to take a close look at this, but obviously this is a welcome information from EPA. Really looking forward to get national standards. This will be the first national standard for any PFAS across the country, to unify all of the methodology, unify the expectations, and then make sure all of the drinking water supplies for the entire country are actually protected. And so very excited to be able to contribute, as we have with a lot of the information that's on our website and a lot of the efforts that Michigan has done, being able to contribute to EPA's efforts in that matter. So we don't have a formal statement today, other than to say that we're welcoming the addition of these standards, and then we will watch very carefully as it goes through the public comment period. It does have a 60-day public comment period, and if you looked at EPA's website, which we can dump into the chat for you, they do have some public listening sessions. I think there's one this week and then one, I want to say on the 29th. But there will be lots of, I think, 60 days for public comment and then a lot of discussion going on in the next, I expect it'll probably take 9 months to a year to get through that promulgation process and get it officially established. And so we're watching it very carefully. This information that they have provided for the establishment of these MCLGs is very important for us to take a very close look at everything that we are doing, from our drinking water standards to our fish consumption advisories and all those things. So we're going to take a close look at the science, make sure that we understand the data they've used, the studies they're referencing, all of that stuff, and we will have some additional information and stuff to share with you in the coming months. So any questions on that before I go on to my next topic? Yep, go ahead, Connie.
Quick question for you on the announcement that came out today. I certainly understand the 4 part per trillion for PFOA and PFOS, but what is the 1.0 hazard index for the rest of them, for the other 4?
Well, Connie, I'm going to take out my cheat sheet because it's a hazard index and they've got some cheat sheets on there on how to do this. But basically, they're going to take that mixture of compounds and then look at those concentrations that you're finding in there, divided by the amount of what they propose as a what they call a maximum contaminant level goal. And then anyways, there's a formula that goes with it. The hazard index combined for all of those concentrations can't be over, it can be 1 or less and you're fine. Anything over 1, which is unitless, is considered a hazard. And so that would require mitigation efforts and then additional monitoring and source reduction. I am not going to pretend to know how this formula works or how it is not in my ball game. So I'm going to talk with, thank you, Mike, for posting that. So we can have a great discussion with our toxicologists about how this is all going to work. But just say I got it today, just like the rest of you, and we're going to wrangle with how this works. So PFOA, PFOS, both at 4 parts per trillion, not a big surprise there, but the hazard index and the combination of addressing, and it was PFNA, PFHXS, PFBS, and Gen X as a mixture is kind of something different. So we're going to roll with it and address it, try to figure it out as we go through. So we got our drinking water, our specialists are on it right now, and they're going to give me a briefing probably in the next couple of days.
Abby, just a quick one yet. The 4 parts per trillion, is that the laboratory method detection level? Is that where they're basing the 4 on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There are laboratories that can get lower, but I think to try to be consistent across the country, they're settling on the 4 parts per trillion that they think most labs can reasonably accommodate for method detection levels.
Okay, thanks, Abby.
Yep. Rick?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the detection level. I haven't read everything concerning that, but they talk about accurate, an accurate detection. So I think people are concerned about, the 1 part per trillion being reproducible, but I think at 4 they have a confidence that they can get a reproducible number. So I think that's why they've zeroed in on that. I haven't read all the details, but it certainly sounded like they were looking for a accurate number, not just a less than. So anyway.
Yeah. I would agree, Rick. I know in Michigan, we know we can get better detection levels from some of our labs that have been doing it for a long time. And we know which labs that we really trust, but I'm sure there's labs across the country in some of our states that have been doing no PFAS testing that have got to get themselves up and running. And this is EPA's way to try to accommodate those labs, make sure that the data is, because it's not just about finding the lowest detection level. It's really about making sure the data accurately represents true concentrations concentrations, and not just laboratory leftovers from other samples. And so having accuracy, reproducibility, and reliability in data is like the key to good laboratory samples. Good point. All right. Anything else on that? All right. Couple of other things I've got for you. I wanted to take the time. I know you guys have spent a lot of meetings, a lot of time and effort going through the public notification document. You guys have put a lot of hard work into it. And I know it's the passion that you guys have for making sure our citizens are safe. That's what we're all here for. I share your passion for that. And we can see from the very wonderful conversation tonight about fish and protecting our anglers, protecting our citizens, again, around that particular discussion, that this isn't something that's going away. We've still got a lot of work to do. So we've taken a lot of time while you guys have been talking about the details of the public notification recommendation. We've been spending time in the background working through what this document might mean for us. We've spent a lot of time, carefully considering this recommendation. So I'd like to take a few minutes and walk through our response to you so you can know where we stand on this. So let me just bring up, and I'm going to have Amy Peterson, our PFAS operations manager, help me with this one. So let me share my screen. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Yep.
So go for it.
Hi,
so
Amy.
go for it, Amy.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, Amy Peterson, EGO's PFAS operations manager. And I'm going to address the 1 mile notification idea. So Abby, if you go to the next slide, what we did is we asked someone to pick at random 3 numbers between 1 and 230. And that was the number of sites that we had at the time. And we wanted to basically draw 1 mile circles around each of those sites and figure out kind of what notification would look like as far as the number of people we were going to reach. So Mike Cherry helped out a lot with this particular effort. So first site was Isabella County landfill. When he drew a 1 mile notification around this, we ended up with 32 homes. And I think we've explained before what we do every time there's a new site, a new investigation. EGO's working with DHHS and local health, and we're identifying the residents that we think are downgradient of a site. So we're working with our geologists and figuring out the groundwater flow direction. In this particular example, none of the wells were deemed to be in need of sampling by the 3 agencies because we had a monitoring network on site around the landfill, and therefore none of the homes were sampled. In the City of Portage Firefighter Training Center, again, one of our 5 randomly selected sites, there's 130 homes in a 1 mile radius. We ended up sampling 20 homes in that particular case. Rickett Road is a site in Brighton, and so that circle was gigantic, picking up 400 plus people in that 1 mile area. In that case, we sampled 22 homes, and I recall they were all non-detect too. Number 208 was the Michigan Army National Guard Lansing hangar, and that is within the footprint of the Capital Regional International Airport site. So if you just drew a circle around that exact hangar spot, you get only 13 wells. We did the groundwater, evaluation and evaluated the res wells around that one. We actually identified 47 homes that we wanted to sample, and there's a presentation that was given in June of 2021 where we kind of walked through all the effort that went into trying to reach out to 47 people to try to get them to sample, but we only got 10 people to agree to sample the homes near that airport and hangar. And then the last one that was picked was the Grayling Army Airfield. 1 mile notification would include 239 people. And we ended up sampling over 700 people, again, looking at groundwater flow direction. And of course, we go incrementally out from a site. If we find PFAS, especially above criteria, we continue moving outward. So just based on these 5 randomly selected sites, the average number of homes in a 1 mile radius turned out to be 163 people that we would be notifying We put up about 42 new sites over the last couple of years. So 42 sites per year. We're only reaching about 6,800 people. And Abby, if you go to the next slide, that's, like 0.006%, I think, of 1.2 million people who are on residential wells. And so we started looking at all the different places that we haven't been able to sample yet. So we have not sampled all the fire stations and not all the wastewater treatment plants. We haven't sampled all landfills. We haven't looked at all the plating facilities, petroleum terminals. There's still a lot of places we haven't sampled yet. At one point, all these layers in a presentation that Steve Slaver gave in June of 2018, there were 11,000 potential impacted sites. We've looked at maybe 500 around the state in the 5 years we've been doing this. So you draw a 1 mile radius around all the potential places that could still have PFAS. You're really touching a vast majority of the state. And we really think we need to be reaching out and educating the 1.2 million residents plus that are getting their drinking water from their own wells. So our conclusion for this part of it, if you go to the next slide, is that our analysis of the facts don't support notifying everybody within just a 1 mile radius of every investigation that we happen to be doing. And that due to the number of all the other potential sites and sources in Michigan, a statewide education campaign really makes more sense to us to help educate everybody out there about potential PFAS sources and where they live in relation to them. We also probably ought to start talking more about septic tanks. But the goal would be to raise general awareness of PFAS and basically encourage everyone to self-sample because we think that's important to do that. So that's the first part of the 1 mile radius aspect of your recommendation. And with that, I want to turn that over the next step to Abby to kind of walk through the rest of that notification document.
Okay. Let me do this, and then I want to pull this over. I just want to spend a few minutes and can you see my screen? Can you see the document on top of my screen now? Everybody can see the notification recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. So as you guys have put in here, I just want, let me blow it up so nobody has to strain their eyes. So as we've talked about, obviously MPART's directive is about not only the implementation of the state's action strategy, which includes and not limited to research, identifying and establish PFAS response actions relative to discovery, communication, mitigation of PFAS. To the extent practical, MPART shall do each of the following, and one of those is perform state and local public outreach to ensure residents in the impacted areas, including all community members, local government, corporate, nonprofit, and affected stakeholders are informed, educated, and empowered. And so we still stick to that. That's still our main objective for all of our MPART actions. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because obviously you guys wrote it. So, but I do want to get to some of the pieces and parts. So qualifying investigation trigger notifications. So Eagle should notify the public of all investigations of PFAS that have the potential to impact any households. So we do intend to do this on a statewide basis through an extensive public education campaign. I think this is very important, but that with 1.2 million drinking water well owners in the state, we need to be comprehensive in this. And then you've got other water supply, bodies of surface waters, other exposure pathways, and MPART intends to continue to include data layers of other relevant sampling available on the website for public information. Again, transparency is our goal, and we are striving to do that. This notification shall be provided at the beginning of any investigation. As part of any current ongoing investigation, direct notification given at a minimum must be given to local units of government, potentially impacted households and individuals. So as Amy said at the beginning of every MPART investigation, we're working with local units of government and local health and Eagle to work together to identify and sample those potentially impacted households. That's like the number one thing we're doing. Because it does need to be done as quickly as possible. So when we talk about what constitutes the initial notice, you've got in here about notice to impacted and potentially impacted households, individuals, regardless of property ownership status, as well as local units of government, not limited to local governments and health departments and local media outlets. So when we talk about that, you know, MPART has been contacting potentially impacted households. As we've talked about in a number of meetings now, often we send a letter, then we follow up with phone calls, then we follow up with door knockings and door hangers, and have to go back sometimes for several different door knocks to try to get access so that we can actually sample wells. And I think we've shared information, but we have about a 40% success rate at getting people after 3 or 4 different attempts to try to sample their wells, because we think that data obviously is the strongest piece that we have for protection of public health, and trying to do that. So that's always a coordinated effort with Eagle, DHHS, and local health. They are usually all going out there to do that door knocking. So the information that we would share, basis for investigation, what chemicals are involved, extent of contamination, next steps, residential well sampling, testing, and contact information. Sometimes that information is pretty scarce. So the information is not often available at the onset of investigations, but we do notify local officials and legislators at the time that the site becomes an MPART site and the information is added online, and we try to get that information out. We also always offer a public meeting and town hall to local officials. So it's usually their choice if they want to do a town hall. That's something that we offer at all of those local official calls. So this is one that you guys talked about a lot as an example. In a case where there's potentially affected private well owners, Eagle should notify potentially affected private well owners located within 1 mile radius at each of the following events: at the beginning of an investigation, when Eagle becomes aware of historical events or current release, when laboratory data becomes available for PFAS contamination. So, you know, MPART again believes that using the information available to determine groundwater flow direction and make sure we reach those houses that are most likely to be impacted and at highest risk is a better use of resources than notifying everyone in a 1 mile radius. Additionally, MPART website is always used to share that information and share results from any of the statewide sampling that we do. So surface water sampling that we do across the state, the Eat Safe Fish information is out there, as well as sampling from public water supplies is on our MPART website. So, so Eagle and local health departments should notify potentially impacted well owners with a home visit or letter as soon as reasonably possible. And you guys had in here 2 weeks. The occurrence of each of those events, you know, the project teams, including Eagle, DHHS, and local health, worked together to identify those potential households at risk. We often already have that information as far as their names, addresses. We're looking for well depths, the years of their well were installed. Other pertinent information as part of that initial precautionary res well sampling effort. So when we go out and identify those homes that are most at risk, we want all of that information to make that assessment. And often, you know, there's some places that we won't have well depths. We may be just knocking on those doors and seeing if we can get people to let us sample anyways, because we want to be conservative in our assessment and make sure we include people. So when we get to the need for ongoing investigation, progress notification, again, we're going to continue to use our MPART website to do that, communicate the initial information as well as any significant results to the public and local officials. We may do town halls as well, but with that large volume of PFAS sampling occurring in the state, there's really no way for us to get all of the data out there on the website. That would be a massive amount of data to be uploading. Provide educational resources. So we have created a PFAS 101 recording in 2021, as well as an introduction to PFAS video in May of 2022. We've got additional resources on the MPART website, as well as DHHS has got a pretty comprehensive drinking water contamination webpage that goes talks about residential wells, how to inspect your well, how to care for your well, how to look at PFAS testing as well as other analytes, because there's obviously other things out there besides PFAS that could be risk to drinking water wells and public health. And then our last piece here, so continued enhancement of the web-based PFAS contamination location system, so the GIS system. MPART continues to add and update that content to the PFAS geographic information system, which has the ability for people to be able to use it, to be able to look at that data and filter by types of sites and the kind of information that they want. So we are looking at updating the compliance sampling for the municipal drinking water systems. I'm expecting that data to get updated in the next month. And I'm also expecting the surface water data to get us that additional round of sampling updated in the next, I'm hoping within the next 6 weeks. That should go live on the GIS system here. So as soon as it does, I will let you guys know. So I wanted to go through that because I think the conclusions for us are that we've got 1.2 million residential drinking water wells in the state. We need to be able to touch all of them. We need to be able to reach all of them in a comprehensive and consistent manner. So we're going to continue to do the precautionary res well sampling that needs to be done at individual sites for those homes that we think are most at risk. Because that's obviously sampling their data or sampling their wells is going to be most effective for protection of public health. Also, though, we will be working with DHHS to implement that statewide education campaign around drinking water and PFAS risks in your drinking water. That is slated to start yet this summer, and so we will be looking forward to that. But because we really need to increase that awareness of, the sources of pollution to their well, encourage people to do self-testing and evaluate their risks to their drinking water, and then be able to identify what are those sources of pollution. So that's going to be a big one that we would love some help with. Participating in community-specific meetings, we've been doing that since the get-go. And continue to do that. And then educating local governments about sources of PFAS. So this is something that we're kind of wondering if our counties and our townships can use their staff to help us evaluate nearby res wells and then reach out to specific homeowners who might be near PFAS sources in their townships, in their counties, and using whatever outreach tools they have available to their local municipality. We're also looking to continue to offer calls to local officials and town halls for all new sites, and then continuing to add our information to the MPART website. So those are the things that we think will be the most useful takeaways from the public notification document, and that we will continue to do. So working together, I think the go forward for us and the COG is, when we work together, we can get some really great things done. So we have updated the website based on your recommendations. We've updated the site tables with new improved information, including project manager data. The GIS system, of course, was one of those comments from AJ Birkbeck that started a long discussion for before his passing. And then that community awareness document that came out of Dave Wynn's group, it has been hugely successful. We can do a lot more of those kinds of things to get the education pieces out there. Teresa Landrum's educating other communities and educating your own community through events is a great example. And then just educating governmental, municipal, local agencies around PFAS and what's in their areas. There's a lot of education that can be done. So we would really like to be able to partner with the COG on additional things. One of the things that we had in mind is this idea of having 1.2 million res wells in the state. How do you break that down into something that's in more bite-sized chunks? We took the just example Bay County and broke out all the townships that are in Bay County with the number of res wells in each count or in each township. So some of these townships only have a few res wells, and maybe we can cross those off our lists is either at risk or not at risk or need to be looked at, and start working our way through every county and every township in the state to do an evaluation of res wells that are at risk. And so what if COG members were able to pass that kind of information on to their townships or to their counties statewide? What if we had that kind of partnership going on? What if each COG member reached out to the community next door to their community to help them educate them on PFAS issues? We have 83 counties. So how do we, we have usually about 20 to 30 active COG members at any one time. How do we break up 83 counties and start working our way through those counties that are most at a potential risk or have, highest risk factors? There's 1,250 townships in the state. There's a lot of what if opportunities here. And we're looking for new things. We're looking for opportunities that you guys might want to dig into as COG members to really make long-term strategic and effective ways to reach our citizens for education of PFAS, because drinking water is one piece of it. But as we heard from Dan's presentation tonight, we've got topics from fish to contamination to polluters to there's all kinds of things we can be talking about. And so the work will be endless, but we can obviously work together to make this more effective. And so I will leave you with the potential of what if opportunities that we can hopefully talk about here for next couple minutes. And I think that was it on my end.
Well, thank Abby. First, I would like to, and Amy, I would like to thank you for getting back with us quickly, for not waiting. The other thing is will that document that you were just showing be available? Thank you.
Yes, I apologize for that. Usually Kelly's got that to you in advance and I was still working on it. So I didn't get it to her before the meeting. So she can get it to you, both the document and the PowerPoint right after we hang up here.
I think we can all appreciate the fact that you were a little busy today and yesterday and the day before and
and the day before that, yes.
With the EPA. Okay. So we do have some questions. Lynn, you've had your hand up for a while.
Here I go. Yeah, I like the what if. And I was actually thinking about that the whole way through. And I'm going to throw this out. Mm-hmm. It's hard to educate people. And it's important that we educate people. And I wonder, and some of those who are new to the group, it's a good reminder to me. I went through my papers the other day. The EPA doesn't help us out here. The Safe Water Drinking Act doesn't include private well owners. And Michigan has a lot. It makes it very hard. And it's very hard for people, because I have talked with people, done some of what you've said, Abby. And it is very hard for people to even grasp the fact that, what do you mean the EPA is not protecting my groundwater? What do you mean that municipal is being looked at, but no one is like, and that's it. They're just testing for this, this, and this. And even just to get past that, the fact that famous line from the movie Dark Waters is like, we protect ourselves on this because it's not a law. It's just written so that if you're a well owner and you don't know about this, it's a lurking danger. So what comes to me, I think actually the easiest thing sometimes is to get money to offer almost free testing. Because I was in a neighborhood last week where I pick up my organic farm produce, and I end up talking to someone who wants more information. I had applied for grant money from someone else so that I could just even offer some free testing. I know this person would have gone for free testing. And if this person got his well sampled, Mary, I'm concerned about, I know he would get everybody in his neighborhood on board if there was a problem. But it's very hard to get over the money issue. And it's very hard to get over the fact that there's not an agency protecting me. And just to get through that is hard, let alone people aren't going to go to websites generally. They do. Some of them do. I talked to a farmer last week who used the website, and it was very effective for him. So there are people that do that, and it's a great resource. I give that resource. But I talk to people, and I think if the state was really serious about this, and we could put the money behind it, that we, like the free COVID tests, those free COVID tests made it possible for me to see my family many times in these past year and two. Some people didn't use them, I get it. But there are people who immediately drop. But the costs, it's so expensive. It's like that's where the state is saying, this is so important. And you're not protected at the federal level. And we have only, as you pointed out, there's only so many resources. By the time you educate and you work with MDHHS, I think it could be years. I mean, because the education has to be riveting, get people's attention without being alarming. And I don't know how trained an MDHHS or these agencies are in getting the attention. But I tell you, if Michigan offered free testing, and we could find a way to get that money, and I always think that's the easiest thing, is to find a way to get the money. When people say that would cost too much, we could never do it. I think that's, to me, we would reach the most people most quickly if we could get all the wells tested. And that is a good way to do it. And I'll stop because I'm going on, but I feel that's what I think. Okay.
I think Patty's question in the chat is really a great one. Can we mandate that PFAS testing be done upon sale of homes? You know, it's something that obviously there's groups on both sides of it that people don't think, but I think, you know, my personal opinion, this is an MPART speaking, this is Abby's personal opinion, is that's a great idea. Let's mandate upon sale of a home, all wells should be tested. Just like your septic tanks should be investigated too. A septic and wells should be tested as part of a sale of home. Now, I don't speak for MPART on that. That's me speaking, but I think that would be an effective way to start getting a large majority of our drinking water wells tested across the state.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to say it is a great idea, but it would take a long time. People don't turn over houses quickly. That's the problem. It's a great idea for down the road, but I'm concerned about it happening. That's why, but I appreciate the comment. I think absolutely we need to get on board. All right, I'm going to mute myself and let everybody else.
Thanks, Lynn. Gail?
Good evening. In Allegan County, we instituted with our ARPA funds a water study group, and they have been raising the awareness on the quality and quantity of water in all of Allegan County. We proceeded with that when we realized our neighbors to the north in Ottawa County were having problems with availability of water because of their aquifer and how the glacial till placed that into Michigan here on the west coast. We used those ARPA funds to a certain extent to betterment of the county, and for getting information on the private wells. We're placing monitoring wells around the entire county, 25 of them that we're paying for out of the ARPA funds, to get that information and test and monitor for that. One other note, just not to change the subject, but my brother and I participate in the farm sludge program here, and with Allegan sewer plant, the biosolids last year tested at 10 parts per billion, which is right at the limit of farm applied. You go over that, you can't apply biosolids out in the farm fields. This year, that testing came back at 8.5. So luckily, in 1 year's time, the city of Allegan is passing less PFAS through their citizens into the sewer system. Hopefully, that'll keep going down through the monitoring efforts of the state of Michigan and MPART. Anyway, those are my comments for tonight on those two subjects. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Yeah,
Tony.
really like that idea, Gail. That's a great idea. We might have to follow up on how Allegan County used county funds to potentially do that kind of evaluation for their citizens. So thanks for sharing that.
Tony?
Yep, thank you. Two questions, Abby. First, if under the view that is in the document that you just went through here a few minutes ago, if we were to have another Traverse City today, the letter that was sent that really prompted this whole thing, that was sent to the Cherry Capital Airport with the homes identified, would the state notify those homes when they sent that letter to the airport?
If, as it stands today, we would be notifying them to get access to sample because we would want to get that done right away. We wouldn't let this, historically speaking, there would be some time to ask the liable party to do that sampling. And nowadays we're kind of taking that on as a precautionary measure, just doing it out in front because those negotiations do take time. So we've completely changed that protocol after Cherry Capital incident in East Bay because we realized that it was just taking too long to do those negotiations and wait for that, 30 days for the liable party to decide that they will or won't do those things. So that precautionary measures are being done. So our notification is to say, hey, we think you're at risk. We'd like to sample your well. And so, yes, we think that this current model of precautionary sampling effectively takes care of that issue.
Okay, so that would have been done right at the beginning of the investigation then, is what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I guess, and then the other question I have, and I don't have it in front of me now, but there was several months ago, Aaron Keatley sent an email to the group here, kind of making some commitments in connection with the original notification document. This seems to diverge from that. That's just my reaction, and I not having had a chance to read them both carefully. I'm wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Aaron's memo really agreed to the concept, agreed to the goals of the public notification document, which is to try to get information in people's hands and try to make incremental progress as best we can towards those efforts. I don't think this diverts from that. I think this is a much broader viewpoint than we had a year ago or 6 months ago, because we realized that with 1.2 million drinking water wells, we got to do something at a much bigger level, as well as continuing to do those focused evaluations. Thanks, Kelly. As well as continuing to do those focused evaluations at the site-specific levels when we get the East Bays that come up. So we'll continue to do those, but there's the whole scope of other people that don't get touched if we continue to just do those. And so we want to do that broad reaching statewide education efforts. So yeah, so we agree in principle that the public should be notified when PFAS investigations start. So we think we're doing that by doing the precautionary sampling of those homes that are directly in potential path of a PFAS plume, doing that with the website, and doing that with statewide education. So maybe they don't get with the statewide education, but maybe we knock on their door, or maybe they will see it with a town hall. Maybe they're going to see it with social media links, because we're going to be through the statewide education campaign. There will be social media burst that we will share with you guys, so you guys can share those with your contacts. And then there will also be, we're hoping for some additional handouts that you guys can give out to public meetings, because we realize there's things that you guys need to be able to do these types of outreach. So that's one of the big questions we have for you guys is what are the most important documents that you could have in your hands to go to, you know, a book club or a knitting club or whatever group you might want to talk to about this. It doesn't have to be necessarily PFAS related, but those people you want to touch in your circle of your community, what are the handouts that would be most effective for them? And so trying to get some of those handouts developed so that we can arm you guys with the proper information to make this statewide education campaign really effective.
Thank you. I just have to kind of laugh there, Abby. I think some of us would love to have time to go to knitting and that other than.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Daniel Brown.
Nice?
Yes, Daniel Brown.
Dan's got a knitting club. We know it.
Oh, you don't want me to knit anything for you. That'd be a Dr. Seuss looking hat or something. Lots of good discussion tonight. Pretty heavy night. I see we're closing in at 8 o'clock. I think, so a lot of ideas, I think, swimming around, and with the EPA limits landing today, I think there's a lot to digest. One thing a couple broad things that I think this last discussion has kind of helped solidify in my mind, at least around needs. I think that over the last few months, the PFAS snowball has started rolling downhill and picking up and accumulating. The amount of attention and the questions and the interest that we're hearing from the media and groups from all over the country, I think that these EPA advisories now bring in a huge part of the country that was kind of ignoring this. And I think we're all going to have a responsibility to interact, with whatever networks we have nationwide to kind of train the trainers in a sense.
Yes.
So, just kind of with that in mind, there's a few things that I think we should start thinking about. I think we do need a PFAS 101 video and a set of resources for anglers, and start thinking about what those resources look like for these other exposure pathways. I think we heard a lot of those good questions tonight. We've been focused on drinking water for obvious reasons, but the issues around fish, other food supplies, other types of products. I think it's good to start rolling out the videos and the resources that we can all talk about and stay reasonably up to date on the science that's happening on all that. There's just no way any of us can stay really up to date on all those different subgenres. The other thing I'd be really interesting to hear and to help pull together is what are the major lessons learned from state staffers and also from COG members in dealing with and addressing PFAS. If you're going to write up, what you wish you had known sooner sort of things, and what you would tell people in other states, what would you put in that document? Is it funding for this or that you have a PFAS 101, that who are you engaging and why? Just pulling all that together, I think, could be a really useful summary of, and framing it, I think, as a joint government citizen document, I think could be really powerful to share.
I I think that would be a great idea. I will tell you, we are getting constant reach out from Michigan has been doing presentations to regions around the country on a pretty frequent basis. Region 10 just asked us for a biosolids presentation. Actually, we've got 3 different presentations going on within the biosolids group, reaching out for other parts of the country wanting to be trained on this. I was out with our fish people this morning. They had a full interview from CBS wanting to understand Michigan's fish program and all the monitoring that's going on. Because we do sample about 1,000 fish a year for PFAS. And so it's a pretty comprehensive sampling program with a lot of years of data. But I did appreciate your statement earlier tonight, Dan, when you talked about making it clearer for anglers to understand the data, to understand those trends. And so we can definitely work on those. So a joint effort on this would be much appreciated. But we're running out of time. So if anybody cares, we had 2 more sites go up on the website, and Kelly can post the next COG meeting on there so Mary can wrap up.
The one thing that I just do want to comment, when you do those outreach things for other states and media and whoever, are you charging for those?
No, I never charged for my presentations. So even if they give a I don't know, there's a term for it, if they'll pay you to come and speak. So as a state, a member of the state, I can't accept
I
those.
understand the reasoning for that, but that could actually be paying for some of these tests, right? You could be funding.
Well, I think for the benefit of the common good, we're almost always willing to help out other states. When we get some of the private entities that want us to donate our time to train their people so they can charge people to come, then I have a little bit bigger issue with it. But the requests for us to come speak to people around the state and the country has been pretty overwhelming lately, just because, as Daniel said, the snowball is rolling fast, and we've been at the lead for a while. And so we get a lot of requests for help around the country, including from our federal partners, which is fine. We're happy to help. So.
Okay, before we wrap this up, we do usually take agenda topics at the end of the meeting. Does anybody have a quick suggestion?
Well, the one I think we were talking about for we had proposed to this group, and I'm assuming either April or May, we'd like to come in and talk to everybody about the Eat Safe Fish Guide and walk through that program again. And we should, fingers crossed, should have an updated Eat Safe Fish Guide here out in April. And so probably by our next meeting, we should have that go live so we can have those updated advisories and consumption guidelines out there for people.
Okay. Lynn, Naf?
I'm sorry, I had myself muted. I was wondering if we could have maybe a session on people who have done outreach sessions and what they would have done differently, what went really well, what didn't go well, what their suggestions are. I think in my area, I've seen some kind of lively audiences on environmental type issues before, and I'm just kind of, I'm trying to make an outreach session as professional and calm as I can be, as it can be. So I think that would really help if I could hear from people who have done it.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll keep that in mind. Tony?
Yeah, I'm just going to renew the request that I made last month. And obviously, Abby, you and I have a disagreement on that. I'll follow up offline after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Teresa?
Hey guys, I made it out of the car into the house, but I wanted to respond to Mary. Mary, we've done outreach as Oh, great. Good grief. I had to call them back. As Abigail had said, and we're going to have another session coming up in May of this year. And what we did, I felt it was pretty successful. Connie Boris and Tony and Sandy attended, and they were panel speakers, and they talked about their personal experiences. And Connie was a great facilitator, and it worked pretty well. What we did, we had in the audience, we had Eagle representation and we had industry representation, but they were in listen only mode to hear from the speakers about their personal experience and to listen to the questions from the audience. So it worked out pretty well. We made it a conversation so people did not feel uncomfortable talking. You can try something like that. We're going to do another session coming up in May, which I'm pulling together now. And what we did, what was good, we made sure that we knew people were going to be there for a while. So we had light refreshments. And what we also did for those traveling from a long way, we provided stipends. You know, everybody can't do it, but we were able to do that. And then for those that came a shorter distance, we allowed them a small stipend for mileage, ones that didn't have to stay overnight. So those things worked well. And we utilized the voice of the people.
Excellent. Thank you, Teresa. Am I seeing any other hands?
I don't think so. I see Tony's hand and Lynn's hand still up, but I don't see any
Lynn,
new hands.
are you raising your hand again?
I'm guessing not. She's probably having trouble unmuting herself. There you go.
Yeah,
Well,
not
this
not
is
Lynn
the other.
Knopf.
Thank you, Lynn Knopf. Okay. Lynn
Okay,
McIntosh.
Lynn McIntosh would like to thank Mary for doing such a nice job leading us through this meeting. We really appreciate it. So
Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for filling in again. Appreciate that. Did a great job.
My pleasure.
Okay, I think that's a wrap. Unless, Abby, you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Happy Pie Day. Go indulge in
Thank
some
you.
pie.
Thanks everybody for coming and participating.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Have a good night. Thanks.
Night.
Okay, bye-bye.